honoring murderers.
The key to understanding any film for me, of course, is context. And if you're looking at John Carpenter's The Fog, the context in terms of his career is this is going to be the follow-up to Halloween, which was an enormous success.
John and Debra were pretty hot around town, obviously, with Halloween just continuing to be legendary and still making a bunch of money for an outlay of pennies. And so they had plenty of heat, and they were entertaining all sorts of notions, offers from here and there.
I think there was a certain amount of trepidation, but with all of those, you go in with blind faith that you're going to do something interesting. And what's good about something like that is the challenge.
And they started focusing in on something that I think, as collaborators, they had wanted to do. It wasn't a knife movie, wasn't a slasher movie.
The sea captain telling the ghost story at the beginning of the movie immediately sets the tone for what it is, which is a traditional ghost story, a traditional jump scare, campfire tale, ghost story.
It was also, like so many of his films, an homage to something he enjoyed as a child or as a young man.
The Crawling Eye was a movie I saw in 1958 when I was a kid. Mainly The Fog, moving. That's the inspiration for it. We didn't have the big eyeballs crawling in the fog.
The artistic context for The Fog is, of course, John Carpenter's love of EC comics. The whole MO of these comics is just desserts or cosmic justice. So if you look at the story structure for The Fog, it's about this town, Antonio Bay, and it's celebrating its 100th anniversary, but the whole town is built on a lie. There's this long-standing wrong sort of in the town's genetics. Think about the 80s and what it would become. You think about things like yuppieism, conspicuous consumerism, which is also what George Romero was talking about in 1978's Dawn of the Dead. So The Fog, in a way, is telling the same kind of story that those other films around that time are telling, and that is about the supernatural sort of correcting this sort of avarice or greed in humanity, and that the people who commit these sort of financial crimes, I guess you'd call. I mean, they commit murder, but they're also stealing, right? That the supernatural is going to fix that.
The producing entity was Avco Embassy, and I think that they had high expectations. Remember, this is a phenomenon that had simply never happened before, is these kids had gone off and made this silly little scary Halloween movie, and for pennies it had made bajillion dollars at the box office. So you better believe that Avco Embassy was they were salivating.
Because of the enormous success of Halloween, Carpenter was able to afford some really high caliber actors for the film. Hal Holbrook, who I think gives the best performance in the film as the priest, and he has this wonderful theatrically trained kind of musicality to the delivery of a lot of his lines, especially where he's reading from the diary. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful how nuanced all the little notes of each sentence are as he goes through. It's a really beautiful performance.
To the 70s, just one after another, and then one of the most boring things to do is come up with names and places, where to set it, and you sit and think. So I just started naming streets and characters after people that I knew in high school, and streets in my hometown. It's just simpler that way.
Would you like something to keep you warm on the way home?
No, thank you. Father, can I get paid?
He plays a character named Bennett, which if you go a little extended, you say, was that Bennett Tramer he was playing, who was a character name in an unproduced script he made called Meltdown, and also the fake Michael Myers, the one who actually got killed in Halloween 2.
There also is another layer because Debra Hill, the producer, collaborated on both Halloween and The Fog as a co-writer. So there are a whole bunch of references from her hometown in New Jersey all stirred in.
You can see Debra Hill wandering through as a townie in one shot. I think the kids in the beginning are Dean Cundy's children. It's a real kind of family affair.
It's
I
always...
think it was the first scene we shot. We set it up on a stage, just a fire effect, a watch, a bunch of kids, and John Houseman. The set itself was a bunch of hay bales so that we could change the contour and create a little topography, but you weren't going to see anything, so we just had duvetine, which is black cloth, covering all of it. That scene, of course, set the tone. Sit down, children, gather around this fire, I'm going to tell you a story.
John Houseman was only on for a day, but everyone was a little intimidated because of his reputation, but he'd blow a line and start to swear and everybody would break up and it was fine.
Shit, I'm sorry.
It was a fairly precisely laid out shooting plan. John and I and other people took a look straight through the script, especially once we had that master location. We could say, okay, look, let's just shoot this. There'll be live action driving through this beautiful scenery. This is going to require some kind of fog.
First, they were trying to keep a very professional attitude about everything and had separate rooms, and that lasted about a day or two, and then they said, this is ridiculous, and they just started enjoying each other's company. It was never a problem.
And then we get scenes with Jamie Lee Curtis and Janet Leigh together in the fog, which is a wonderful thing. And I think the only other time they appeared on film together was in Halloween H2O, where they shared a scene, but John Carpenter sadly was not directing that one.
This town sits around for 100 years and nothing happens, and then one night the whole place falls apart.
Nancy, please. Shh. I said Nancy.
One of the things that really impressed me was that we had a scene where we shot it in a restaurant there in Point Reyes, California, and she had to break down and cry. And for technical reasons, because it was a very difficult sequence, she had to do it over and over and over again. Boy, she could just do it every time. Bang, bang, bang. That's that old studio training.
Really have much in the way of scenes together. Behind the scenes, they were always having so much fun. And Janet Leigh was such a pro.
Our celebration tonight is a travesty. We're honoring murderers.
No, we're not!
Everyone I've ever spoken to that worked with John Carpenter has told me basically the same thing, that he's cool, even-tempered, knows exactly what he wants, doesn't waste time, doesn't waste money.
He knew the craft of directing. He knew how to elicit an emotion. He knew where to put the camera. He knew what lens to use. He knew he was a student of directing.
He loves shooting in kind of mid-shots like Hawks did. He doesn't favor tricky angles or anything like that. He shoots very cleanly, very straightforwardly.
The technique of the 30s and 40s when sound film came in, and some of the great directors perfected their craft, Hawks included. And John Ford. The invisible technique was that you didn't notice the
And it's really amazing when you stop and think about the fact that all of that actually had to be done and created on set. It wasn't done later in post, as I'm sure it would be, today.
When the fog in this giant wide shot is moving in toward the beach, this crescent shape, that was actually Stinson Beach. You'd get the camera out, you'd set it on a tripod, and then you would anchor it really, really well so that a little gust of wind didn't cause it to move or shudder or anything. Then you would lock it down, take your hands away, and shoot a plate.
And then we did a fairly elaborate in-camera trick where we took that shot and then we superimposed it by putting a frame of it in the camera and then building a black surface that was a miniature of the bay, of the houses and so forth, so that we could squirt very dense fog and have it cross over this thing and react to lumps and shapes that we had put in it that would correspond to the lumps and shapes.
But what he had to sort of create through the editing room.
It was a tricky nut to crack, the fog. We went into this with virtually the same crew that had shot Halloween and posted Halloween. All the credits were nearly identical. So you would expect, hey, it worked on Halloween. The Fog, that's a good script. Ought to work on that. It didn't.
For all those who can hear my voice, look into the darkness across the water. Look for the fog. John Carpenter's The Fog. What in the living hell is out there?
It's always fun to see a movie once it's completed, because when you're working on it, you're just having a good time. There's nothing scary about it. When you see it with an audience full of people, particularly other people who were on the cast and crew, it's just such a thrill.
The Fog was really an anomaly when it came out because mood-driven horror movies, especially ones that were traditional ghost stories like that, had become very, very rare. You know, I think The Changeling is one of the only ones that they did around that time.
Although The Fog was a financial hit for John Carpenter, following up on Halloween, it was not as well received by critics. A lot of critics felt that there were problems with the Fog setup. At some point, they felt tension was diffused because we learned that the ghosts were only going to take 6 victims.